Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear. Miracle Works Detailing. No cars too dirty. And by Cycle Mart, your motorcycle parts store.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks so much for tuning in again tonight for episode 54 of Tallboys
and Trackmasters.
So nice having a fridge full of them not far away. Isn't it?
Oh man, it's the highlight of the week.
Well, speaking of the week, how was your weekend, man?
Pretty good. Me and Shallow got out, rode two up for the first time. That is a learning curve, especially on a smaller bike. So hopefully in the future, get something a little bigger and do that more often. But man, we just both had a really good time.
That's what it's all about, man. A little bit of Wives of TNT, because I got to get Heather out to ride a little bit around the farm there. She was doing pretty good. So had a good weekend. Did the training class. That was pretty good success up there at Tom King's. Thanks again, Tom, for hosting that. And so overall good weekend. Huh?
Good.
Sweet.
Good to hear it.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to you for setting up a new intro.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty sharp.
That was out of necessity because
aware.
We've just had nothing but weird problems here lately. The last couple of weeks, man.
We've really been earning the Tallboys and Technical Difficulties moniker here lately.
I'm going to make a sticker that says that, so we can start giving those out.
I'll put one on my bike right next to the one about the maintenance intervals for a KTM.
Oh no, the maintenance intervals. They're so bad. Well, speaking of maintenance intervals.
That's a good segue into this episode,
I think it is.
Isn't it?
Yeah, this is episode 54, Two-Stroke Tuesday. There's is a two-stroke, in your opinion, a viable dual sport option?
Depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
You could definitely treat one like I treat my 350, for instance.
Yeah.
Like, especially for local stuff, I think it would be a great option. But as far as mixing in a lot of asphalt and even like higher speed gravel, et cetera, it's when it kind of starts to become a burden. And we'll get into that. We've ridden around with enough street legal two strokes to have a decent idea of some of the pitfalls.
Yeah.
But
it's been interesting, especially with the 304 the last couple of years that we've been doing it, that the two strokes have made a resurgence. I've seen more street legal two strokes than anything else really the last couple of years as a growing segment as far as coming to rides. And you see that at a lot of dual sport events anymore. They're getting so specialized. And I know we've talked about it in one of the first episodes we ever did, like what is dual sport these days?
Yeah.
It seems like it's going more towards the extreme hardcore single track side of things.
And the definitions changed even since we made that episode.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to see over the series of 3 or 4 detour rides. First it started to become more orange.
Yeah.
And then it branched out further from that still and ended up being more and more street legal two strokes on the hard loop. Or at least ones they tell us are street legal when they can't go through tech or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've noticed that a lot too. Some of the content creators I watch on YouTube, fewer and fewer four strokes in the mix, especially like out west.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dual sports out there that are just KTM 300s with license plates.
Yeah, and I think it is very area specific.
Yes.
So obviously, if you are getting an ambulance outside, if you are out that way, out west where it's easy to get to the trailheads and everything. Hopefully, we don't have anybody dead in the parking lot down below us. That ambulance isn't a two-stroke, is
It might be.
it? Old Detroit in there.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway,
that's got to be a fire engine.
It sounds like a fire.
Maybe that was a Detroit.
It might be.
Yeah.
It might be. Hey, speaking of Detroit, real quick, to get off subject, but took the Versus 650 out Friday with parents to do a little easy loop scouting.
Yes.
And was up around Masontown, flat tire, hit a pothole and bent the cast wheel on the Versus, right? And
that's awful.
Lo and behold, who comes and rescues me? Mr. Chad Johnson. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it again, buddy. Chad's got a crew cab F450 dually up there that has a Detroit diesel down it.
Does he?
Oh, that thing was sick. So cool.
I need to make it up to his little compound sometime and have a peek around. But man, it's always good. That's one of the best things about being in a riding club is you can almost always rope somebody into coming and saving your day.
Well, it was funny. I called and I knew he lived pretty close to there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm coming back from the doctor. I'll be there in about 20 minutes." Rescued me. So
what a guy.
Seriously, what a guy. Ladies, if you're single and ready to mingle, hit up Mr. Chad Johnson.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Anyway,
let that be a lesson in cast wheels.
Yeah, they're not very good off road, especially if you're doing some spirited riding like I was.
Yes.
But yeah, anyway, like back to the two-stroke thing. So, like I said, I think it's very area specific. If you're out west where you can immediately get on the trails, there's not very much city life around or anything like that. It's pretty easy to get out there on the two-stroke. Now, say you're like where Rob and Lisa were in Jersey, like in a downtown city, it's probably hard to get on a two-stroke to go anywhere. And I think that the preface to all of this should be, is a two-stroke legal on the streets in your area?
Yes.
And luckily here in West Virginia, those laws have kind of relaxed with the SPV stuff coming out, and
that has been a big positive of all the side-by-side stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, and the enhanced inspections and all there's a defined process now to convert a two-stroke bike to be street legal in West Virginia. And I know, Michael Heston in the club was one of the first guys to ever do that on I think he had a 300 XCW around here anyway that I know.
I think so.
Yeah, so I think it's very area specific about if it's a viable option or not.
For local stuff, like I said, around here, I could definitely see it. Guys come and do the hard loop year after year after year on street legal two-strokes around here. But the problem really starts to set in like coal fields, for instance. Could you imagine we went down to do that ride and you had brought a 300 XCW with a plate?
Yeah.
That would have been a real struggle.
That's not the time or place for a two-smoker.
No.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a dedicated tool in your arsenal of bikes. Like it can't be your only dual sport that you have, unless you live in an area where you're right there beside something like that. But yeah, I mean that goes right into the pros and cons that we'll get into here shortly. So, what do you think would be a good situation to have a street legal two-stroke?
As a third bike. Yeah. So ideally you would have, if you're into the multiple different disciplines, you'd have a larger bike set up for adventure moto camping. You would have a KTM 500, 350, somewhere in there that's for kind of harder trails. But you can still go out and explore on it. You can still hit some pavement. You're still not worrying about like, oh man, I got 50 hours on this piston, like, and then for hardcore stuff, like pavement is the enemy. Pavement is lava.
Yeah.
I could definitely see running a street legal two-stroke at that point.
Yeah.
Because the off-road performance is better.
Yeah.
For enduro, there's a reason why you see exactly 0 four-stroke bikes running Romaniacs, etc. And actually
competing for the overall.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason why Manny Lettenbichler, Graham
Yeah.
Jarvis, et cetera, all running 2-strokes. Yes, I'm aware people run 4-strokes in hard enduros. I know that Billy Bolt has had great success with a built KTM 350 for super enduro. It's all about just selecting your weapon for the task.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And we've said before, like it always behooves you to have maybe a bike that's more hardcore oriented and one that's good on the street too. So let's go into some of the just pros and cons of a two-stroke in general. There's a lot of different options and stuff out there. One of the first things that I can think of is how lightweight a two-stroke is compared to a four-stroke.
Yes.
I mean, there's no getting around it. It's just a lighter overall package.
Yep.
There's less moving parts, so it's definitely the lightest option.
If you've ever taken the cylinder head off a bike, there's some pretty good heft in that little chunk of aluminum and valves and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't have to sweat any of that on a two-stroke. You definitely have some weight savings. It is a more simple power plant, ideally, with all the different strange injection systems and everything they're trying now to try to meet emissions. Things are getting a little weirder. It's getting bad when there's kits to take an EFI KTM 2-stroke and revert it back to a carburetor because it runs better.
Yeah.
There's definitely the power to weight ratio.
Yeah. That's
is significant. So, and people idealize it in the sense that, okay, a 4-stroke has a power stroke once every 4
revolutions.
Yeah. 2-stroke every 2.
Yeah.
So some people idealize as well. Obviously, a 2-stroke is twice as powerful.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily apples to apples, but there's a lot of people that compare like a 250 Woods bike to a 125 2-stroke, for instance.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily accurate, but there's definitely something to be said about that thing having a power stroke every other revolution.
Yeah.
Your traction, it's a lot more difficult to stall out, especially throw a flywheel weight on one of those things, and you can really tractor around and have a good setup.
Yeah, and in layman's terms, basically, the difference. So if you have a 2-stroke, your pistons at top dead center comes down, gets a mixture of fuel and oxygen.
Your pistons at the bottom.
Comes up. You have a spark plug ignition go off. Blows that piston back down. The exhaust goes out. The exhaust port back up. That's it. And obviously on 4-stroke, there's a lot more intricacy in that. So you have the piston goes down. You have an intake valve that opens, sucks in air. Piston comes back up and compresses that air with that fuel mixture. It explodes, goes down, and as it comes up, the exhaust port opens up and shoves the exhaust out.
Pushes that out into the header.
A lot more moving parts, a lot more.
It's a just greater level of complexity, but a lot of people, especially older riders, really refuse to accept the fact that 4-stroke machines have evolved past 1980.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not all air cooled anymore.
Things have really gotten a lot better in terms of 4-strokes, which we'll get into maintenance. I've got kind of an interesting take on 2 versus 4-strokes when it comes to maintenance. But another caveat that's kind of went away over time was the issue of the power band on a 2-stroke. When it really just kind of came alive when you were on the pipe through past a certain rev range. Well, after after Kawasaki, I believe was the first to put a power valve setup on a 2-stroke, and that is really a piece of technology that revolutionized 2-stroke bikes in general. It allowed you to have a wider power band, so you weren't effectively just riding something that lugged along until 6,000 RPM, and then you just hold on for dear life.
I always got a crack of people talking about that, like, oh, that power band in there,
Yeah.
it's insane. And I remember going to like Outlaw Motorsports years ago, and he had on the rack, it was actual like rubber band. It
Yeah.
said power valve for power band replacement. So you know, all bikes have a power band.
Yeah.
It's just two strokes are more insane and aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not necessarily intake related on two strokes so much as the pipes on two strokes are shaped in such a way that you're actually wanting to use sound waves to change the direction of part of your exhaust flow to run back towards the cylinder to force some of the fresh air fuel mixture that's actually
Yep.
making it out of the cylinder back into it before your ports and everything are closed up. So otherwise, you're losing out on power. That's part of the reason why two strokes are so difficult to get to meet emissions.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why the MPG's not great, which is something else we'll touch on.
Yep.
There's still some caveats, and we're really kind of entering a point in time where what else can be done to a two-stroke to try to make it, to try to evolve it.
Yeah, I think KTM obviously with the fuel injection setups, the TBI, the TPI, they've had their issues and they've had some teething problems, but really they're about the only ones that were kind of pursuing that technology to try to enhance and improve a two-stroke as best you can.
The Japanese manufacturers largely gave up.
Yeah.
Honda doesn't have any two-stroke offerings. Kawasaki, I believe, has a KX85 or similar, younger.
Yeah, it's smaller bikes.
Smaller, bike oriented for smaller riders. Of course, Yamaha still makes the
125 and the 250. They're kind of the last Japanese holdouts, really.
And I've really just considered picking up a Yamaha 125 just to mess around on.
Yeah.
It's just
I've
a screamer.
Had several of them growing up racing. Great bikes. I was always a YZ250 fan. Obviously we had 4 of them at one time in the household going, so that was our dedicated bike and brand. And I always loved the YZs. But obviously the Austrians, the Europeans, the Sherco, Beta, KTM, Husky, those are your top of the line two-stroke guys now. So
without a doubt. The only company still carrying the torch, pretty much the ones you talked about. Of course, there's Raihu or Raiju, however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
And there's some Chinese manufacturers like GPX, for instance, that still build a two-stroke bike. But as far as the Japanese, the Japanese are pretty much out of it for the most part.
Yep. And I always love, like, you'll scroll through a news feed and there'll be a fake post about KX300 two-stroke coming back, and it's the most god-awful Photoshop picture you've ever seen. I hate when people share that stuff. They're like, no, it's true. It's coming back. It's coming back. See right here. Get out of here with
that. It's just rampant misinformation. I get stuff like that all the time. It's like, oh, they're revamping the DRZ 400. It's going to be a KTM killer. It's like, no, it won't.
It's April Fool's every day for the old people like that.
It's definitely April Fool's if you're gullible.
But so back to the pros. Obviously we said lightweight. It's cheap. Obviously there's less moving parts. It's easier to produce. It's the power to weight ratio is a lot better, CC to CC, like you were saying.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it was always funny how basically the racing side of things pushed the development of the 4-stroke so much that obviously they were letting 400cc Yamahas, when they were the bread and butter coming out, race against 252 strokes. Well, that's kind of an unfair advantage in my opinion.
Agreed.
You have way better or way more CC, way bigger piston to run against that stuff. But honestly, I know at least in like the GNCC side of stuff, when you go to do like the XC2 class, 252 strokes can race against 254 strokes, which is how it should have been.
That's exciting. Yeah.
So that power to weight ratio is way better, CC to CC.
Yep. Agreed.
And honestly, whenever you got a problem and you need to rebuild, it's thousands of dollars cheaper to rebuild a 2-stroke compared to a 4-stroke.
Yep.
There's just less moving stuff in there.
Yeah.
Way easier to do for the average Joe.
And it's simply just quicker and more simple.
Yeah.
There is no worrying about is my intake gear off a tooth after I put this thing back together. Yeah, that's not a problem that you have with a two-stroke.
Suck but bang blow. That's what they say, right?
Yep.
It's simple as can be.
Yep.
It's the simplest thing.
Well, it's pretty much the most simple form of an internal combustion engine, short of a one-stroke jet engine, where it's just a continuous stream of intake,
Yeah.
ignition, and exhaust.
I'd ride a jet dual sport.
I bet you would.
I would.
I'd really like to try one of those Wankel engine Hercules
the
bikes.
rotaries. The rotaries.
Very interesting machines.
You know what's the best thing about a rotary is they sell rebuild kits at any convenience store. Sponsored by Doritos.
Bag of Doritos.
There's just flying triangles everywhere in there.
The spicy Dorito. You know, it's pretty crazy. The concept for that engine came to the guy in a dream.
Yeah.
So that shows you how off the wall something like that is.
You'll blow your apex seals, kid.
Yeah, I mean, you will. There's a reason why you can find Mazda rotary equipped vehicles for next to nothing.
You know what I thought was really cool when we got to go up to talk to Tom McKee and saw that Suzuki up there, that rotary. That was a wild contraption there. So there's all kinds of different stuff out there.
Yeah. So
well, let's get into some of the cons of a two-stroke overall. I mean, you know, the first one we got written up there, really, really poor miles per gallon.
Yes, and that's something that we've witnessed any time that we've ridden anywhere with, you know, somebody's got a two-stroke bike. There were some folks that took two strokes on the easy loop
that betas
were very, and rightfully so, concerned about their ability to go. It was like 60 miles until the next fill up. It's simply, you know, it's just intrinsic to a two-stroke engine that they're just not particularly fuel efficient unless you're in that power range. Because otherwise, like if you're lowering your rev range, it's just with every exhaust stroke, it's just pushing raw fuel and air out too. You're losing.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, beyond MPGs, it's really difficult to get them to meet emissions because it's just, again, it's intrinsic to the design.
Yeah.
It burns oil.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's lubricating everything. Is it has to have the oil and the gas. Yeah,
Hopefully.
Hopefully. You'll find out real quick if it isn't.
So that's something that I could never really bring myself to trust with like a large degree of faith was oil injected two strokes.
Yeah.
Because it takes a very short period of time to just completely wreck your bottom end and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And one of those things.
You know what the bad part too is a lot of times on a two-stroke, if it's running lean like that, where it's not getting enough fuel or the oil mixture, it tends to just start running better and better and better and better.
Yep. Yeah. And you're like, wow, this thing's like
it's great.
It's like a whole new bike. Who ported who ported this thing? Yeah. So that's something. You know, mentioning. I mean, if you're not going to trust your fuel or your oil injection system, you're going to have to pre-mix.
Yeah.
So in a lot of areas of this state, it is difficult enough simply to find fuel.
Yeah.
Now you also have to carry your own premix.
Yeah.
Or not premix, but your oil and everything. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that have done it enough that they're really good at, you know, approximating that ratio of oil to fuel in the tank or whatever. But
it's another thing you got to carry on the bike and worry about.
Yep.
And you know, a lot of times there's places around here where the only gas you're gonna be able to get is 87 octane.
Yep.
That tends to not work too well in these high-strung two-strokes around here anymore. You know, you're gonna have a lot of detonation and you know the risk of
especially high compression setups.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing that it could be a con, it could not, just depends, is, you know, a two-stroke basically has no engine braking.
No. It's actually, well, I've heard from multiple sources, that you should not engine brake on a two-stroke because your rate of lubrication is significantly decreased because you're not drawing as much of a fresh charge of fuel and air. I assume on an oil injected bike that's largely been done away with, but even then, I mean, anybody that's ever tried to engine brake on a two-stroke, it's kind of just futile.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. I think that's kind of situation specific as well. Might be times where you want to go fast, you don't need that engine braking. So, I think it's something else too is that we don't really have up there. It takes a completely different riding style to ride a two-stroke compared to a four-stroke.
Yes.
You can be really lazy and ride a four-stroke.
Yes.
Two-stroke takes some effort to keep it up in the power band and not, you know, it just there's a lot more finesse about everything.
Yep.
Whether it be tuning the car and picking your jet sizes and what ratio you're mixing the gas at, 32, 40, 50 to 1, what have you. There's a lot more delicate stuff involved when it
Yep.
comes to doing a two-stroke.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Well, I guess now's a good time to go into maintenance.
Yeah.
One big caveat with a two-stroke is your crank seals.
Yes.
If those are failing, got to get in there and fix it because otherwise you're sucking in unmetered air, and it's no bueno.
Yeah. Or sucking oil out of the transmission to burn into the engine.
Not good. But good lubrication.
Oh, great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, you get all that splooge coming out of the back of the exhaust on there running down,
Yeah, I mean that's the problem for the dude behind you, really.
or the mosquitoes around you.
My take is as follows: two-strokes are cheaper to maintain to an extent. My KTM has 6,000 miles on it. How many pistons? How much would I have gone through on a two-stroke to get 6,000 miles out of something versus my KTM's on its original?
You're at least 2 top ends and
original everything. Yeah. Depending on how you ride, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, four-strokes are maintenance intensive to a point. They're a lot better than they were previously, like I stated. The problem with four-strokes is if something goes wrong, it normally goes really wrong. Like source a new head, new piston, new cylinder. The costs really start to add up, especially, if you're fortunate enough to ride something like a KTM 300, there's countless, and I mean countless options out there for some aftermarket pistons and cylinders. And
as long as it's not an eBay Nomura, stay away from those.
Yeah,
two-stroke junk.
Yeah, those eBay Nomuras are the ones that they couldn't cast into Kimco's.
Well, they couldn't make beer cans out of them either. They just made them into pistons.
Yep, like that.
I do miss the days of where everything's expensive nowadays, but you used to be able to go like on Rocky Mountain or Motorsport and buy a complete wrench rabbit kit for a two-stroke. Crank, piston rings, every gasket, every seal you could want, all the bearings, and you were like $380 to rebuild a 252 stroke.
Yep.
And then at that time, four strokes, about $2,000 for everything.
Yep.
Timing chains, valves, all that other stuff. Now, where we're at now, I think that same wrench rabbit kit is probably $600 for the two-stroke, and you're close to $3,000 for a four-stroke rebuild now.
Something else too to consider for four-stroke rebuild is finding a competent machine shop that can do what you need done. Like if you need new valve seats and everything put in there, it's not something you're going to find locally for the most part. You're going to be shipping it somewhere, and that's an incurred cost. And that's really something to consider. Is a two-stroke is definitely more friendly for the guy that just wants to do it himself, do it quickly, and be done with it. You don't want to wait for several weeks for your head to get from A to B and then from B to A and all that. But as far as a two-stroke goes, it's like anything else. It's gotten to be more reliable over time for the most part.
Yeah.
So you're not worrying about soft seizing a piston in an old air-cooled, 400cc two-stroke or whatever.
Yeah.
Things have improved significantly.
Yep. I think one of the last cons that we do have up there is obviously vibration. It's just inherent of the design that it's going to produce a
Yeah.
lot more vibrations throughout the entire chassis.
Yeah. It's a
And
different kind of vibration too.
it is. Yeah.
It's not like a thumper or anything like that. It is a very harsh,
Yeah.
almost buzzsaw feeling. If you've ever ran a chainsaw for a couple hours,
Very
you,
fatiguing on
you,
our hands and arms.
they call it like the zing. You
Mhm.
get off and your bones feel like they got static electricity running through them.
That's
And
a good
yep,
comparison. Yeah. So there's obviously solutions out there to mitigate all that stuff as well. Even vibrations.
oh yeah,
Having an X trig bar mount
yep.
setup, or
Mako 360.
yeah, the gel filled. I know there's even handlebars out there now that have like rubber filled ends that are weighted to try to keep down on that vibration.
From like Tempur-Pedic.
Yeah. 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 What's your setting? I'm a let's see. I'm a CR double high. That's my temper.
a lot of modern two strokes are running a counterbalance system too.
So yeah, that was going to be the next segue here. What are some of those fixes to make it a more viable option for a dual sport? And that's the first thing we got up there is a counterbalance engine. So I think most of the newer Euro style two strokes, they're pretty much all counterbalanced now to cut down on that vibration and to make it a lot more manageable.
Yep.
And a flywheel weight kind of does that same thing. If you have, say, a YZ250 or a Japanese two stroke that doesn't have that availability, that the flywheel weight can kind of cut down on that as well. Um, we were talking about oil injection systems there now to kind of those can be hit or miss. I see that a lot
Yeah.
where
And oil injection's been around a long time.
since the 70s,
I mean,
since two strokes have been out.
It's been, of course, when it started out as analog, it was a mechanical system.
Yep.
And I think, I'm not sure if it's on current gen bikes or it's proposed for future gen bikes, but a solenoid based um, lubrication system.
Mhm.
So as opposed to using power off the engine to drive a mechanical fuel pump, it's actually using electricity from the battery to operate solenoids.
Yeah.
Or not a fuel pump, an oil pump.
Yeah.
To actually distribute that lubrication. So it's interesting. I know that I think it's the modern, like the current gen KTM two strokes are running an electronic power valve.
Yeah.
It's not mechanical anymore.
Yeah.
It operates kind of, I assume, like a throttle body where it's got like a little
basically.
stepper motor type setup, and
Yeah.
it's just an interesting approach.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's so many different things out there, with that power valve technology, like you were talking about, and then, case versus reed induction. And
Yeah.
that's a very big.
Go back to rotary valves.
Yeah. And we talked about the vibration with the rubber bar mounts and stuff, but one of the big problems too with that two stroke is a lot of times the stator size is not very big on there because
Yeah.
it doesn't need to run a whole lot of stuff. So sometimes you find yourself having trouble getting a reliable lighting system. Obviously turn signals, blinkers, and
Yep.
it seems like the two strokes are definitely more AC power oriented, where
Yep.
you're going to have that pulsing signal at all
So
times.
think about what your end goal is, and think about your two options to start. Is it easier to take a four-stroke bike and make it off-road capable, or is it easier to take a two-stroke bike and make it on-road capable?
Yeah, that's a
great
point.
You know firsthand the downfalls of trying to add a lighting and blinker system to a bike that was never intended to have one.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. You'll never find a good spot for your battery. Um, is the AC side of the wiring diagram that runs things for the bike, like the CDI box and stuff, is that capable of being grounded back to the frame? Are you going to have to float all your grounds back to the battery?
Yep.
Lots of electrical gremlins and issues there.
Yep. Another thing to consider, and I know this doesn't really apply to you, but the noise.
Yeah.
So your KTM's pretty loud, right?
Yeah.
Mine's pretty quiet. I just prefer it that way. I love the sound of a two-stroke. There's really nothing better than sound of a two-stroke on a pipe. But if you ride in like sensitive areas, there is probably no greater dead giveaway sound of mischief happening than the sound of
That's
a
a good.
two-stroke on a pipe or on the pipe.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and like what we talked about with Ryan last week, and that noise pollution
Yep.
is a big issue with the two strokes, and
Yep.
that's something to look forward to.
Nothing sounds better. Nothing
Oh.
smells better.
Oh, the smell! Are you kidding me? You get that Klotz or that Maxima Super
Yep.
M pouring out of
Yeah.
the back of that thing. Oh,
Yep.
I will never forget. I think it was the second. Yeah, it was the second year we did the 304 detour. Mike Hessen had just got that KTM 300 street legal, right?
Yep.
And we're headed out from Paw Paw. We're going across downtown Fairmont, high level bridge in the middle of town, right in the middle of the day. And he's sitting there at a red light, and that thing's just sitting there idling. I'm right behind him. It's like what was uh, the old Austin Powers movies? What was that? The Fat Bastard.
Yep.
Wafting. We're wafting. That was me
Yeah.
behind all them two strokes.
Man, they just do smell good.
There's candles out that smell like clots and stuff
Yes.
now.
Yes.
A guy at work, Kenny Vincent, I seen he posted a thing up the other day where they got him a clots candle.
Nice.
So, yeah. I used to joke around that before I go out on a date, before I met Heather, I'd take a little Super M, rub on the wrist,
Oh,
rub
yeah.
on the neck. If the lady's like that, then she's a keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the only one that liked that. So.
She was a keeper.
Worked out.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of, pros and cons wise, before we kind of get into what some of the options are out there for dual sports?
I feel like we've glanced over something one way or the other.
Yeah, we probably have.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have. Well, let's move on to that. We'll kind of go through what's
con.
Yeah.
Difficulty registration in a lot of areas.
Oh yeah,
we kind of touched on that, but
yeah,
the loopholes that exist, there are groups of people out there dedicating time and energy to close them.
Yeah.
Every day. There's a group of people out there that looked at, like, there was a Vermont loophole, South Dakota loophole, et cetera,
Two big
that
ones.
people with pull and power from a political standpoint that are dedicating, part of their life to making sure that you cannot register a two-stroke. In my opinion, if I pay taxes on this machine, I should be able to do with as I please. If I pay for the road infrastructure that I'm going to operate this on, I should be able to do as I please.
Cheers to that.
I won't get overly political, but at some point you can't sit and boast about being the
land of the free,
poster child of freedom. I mean, I don't know. We just kind of lost our way.
Yeah.
What's more iconic of old America than two-stroke motocross or something like that, man? That was like the last breath of life from the States to some extent.
We didn't fight the British to become a free country to not be able to ride a KX 500 down the main street in town.
It's awful. You get out in California, it's like if you don't get that little stupid green sticker or whatever, you can't even run one off road.
Yeah, that's another element of craziness.
Absolutely disgusting. And people get complacent. They say, "Well, that's California."
Yeah.
Well, it's like we talked to Rob and Lissa. Yeah. Or else now it's going to be on your doorstep. At some point in the foreseeable future.
I doing some research for this episode, kind of stumbled on Adventure Rider, some forum threads and stuff about people dual sporting two strokes, and you can kind of see one of the things that I found was that you could there was a list that had, I think, all of the different states that still currently would let you register a two stroke, and one of the lists come down through, I think it was like 17 to 12 to 17 states where it's still fairly easy, and I say that in quotations, fairly easy to be able to register your two stroke. Now, one of the caveats that you can see from KTM, Sherco, Beta, Raju, these companies nowadays, a lot of times the MSOs that they include with the bikes a lot of the back in the day used to say for off-road use only,
Yep.
and you were pretty much screwed at that point, where basically any DMV is not going to let you get that thing street legal.
Yep.
Well, a lot of the MSOs now just say motorcycle on them, and that's a little bit of a caveat and a loophole that they've included to let you kind of get those registered, and that's why we're seeing a lot of those. I can think back to my first times doing some dual sport riding and some events where you would constantly see bikes from Pennsylvania, two strokes, street legal. You're
Yep.
like, how can we get that? We need
Yeah.
that here. And, luckily with the efforts of Mark Maynard and people like that and the Country Roads Coalition to fight for that stuff, that, West Virginia is basically seeing, hey, this is another source of income for us, and it's kind of a smaller majority, but we can get these things street legal in West
Man,
Virginia now.
it's sad that to be able to do something or be quote allowed to do something, you have to demonstrate that there is a vested interest in making money off of it for
Yeah.
the government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
That's where we're at these
that's
days.
another point entirely. Something else that's going to be interesting is as electric bikes become more prevalent, what the registration, landscape looks like for them, because a lot of this is like, well, you know, people largely don't like dirt bikes. People that aren't involved in the hobby largely don't like them because they associate them with hooliganism.
12 o'clock, boys.
They're loud, et cetera, et cetera. So we're about to find out, like, okay, well, this isn't loud. It makes very little noise, if any at all. So did you hate loud bikes, or do you just hate the entire concept
Yeah.
of someone being able to ride a dirt bike on blacktop, period?
Yeah.
And
I don't think anything's going to change on that regard.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. You're still going to have bad representation of the entire sport.
Yep, you
with
will.
electric bikes.
Yep, you will.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be a different problem. So let's go through some of the street legalness, and use that in quotations, of some of these bikes. And obviously, you know the first bikes out around the early '70s and stuff were, most of them were two strokes, and you did have some street legal options out there. So here's an old Suzuki TC 185, which I actually used to have one of these years ago when I was younger. Um, you know, two stroke, it's street legal, high low range. I know me and you've talked off camera about hopefully coming up with some kind of high low range for a dual sport bike. That'd be fun.
I'd kill.
Yeah.
Go back to that
Yep.
bike for a minute. That whole setup's really just an iconic for
Yeah.
that period of time. Twin shock rear, you got the big couch-like seat,
All comfy.
the all metal fenders, metal gas tank, just a real basic bike, air-cooled two-stroke,
Yep.
non-power valve, and those were the original dual sports.
Yeah,
It
seriously.
was quite some time between the inception of the street and trail bike and the inception of like the four-stroke that you didn't have to rebuild every 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
So for a really long time, for the beginning of the hobby, it was largely street legal two-strokes.
Yep. And that kind of the last modern two stroke for Suzuki, the RMX 250, which was another one of those bikes that, yes, maybe certain states around us you could have got street legal, and West Virginia probably wasn't one of those back in the day. But you know, that's a theme that you'll see. It's a lot of enduro oriented two strokes are the ones that you can kind of get street
Yep.
legal, because obviously they've got the lights and the bigger stators and stuff to get that done. Kawasaki had one that was made from 1976 to 2001, and I used to see these things around all the time, and they're kind of rare these days.
Yeah.
And that's the old KE 100s, man.
I
Simple.
I'm a sucker for like weird color schemes. So the neon green, the purple seat, and
Oh, yeah.
the KE graphics on the tank, like that's effectively a '70s bike.
Yeah.
That just happened to be produced late towards the 20th century.
Yep. And that kind of got us up to, this is a KDX 250 that was kind of a overseas, well, not in North America import. You can see
Yeah.
it's got blinkers and everything on it. And I know one of the guys that comes and does the 304 with us, part of Jim Altire's crew, Jesse. He's got a KDX 200 that's street legal. I've seen a lot of those around
Nice.
that have plates on them.
I'd really like to pick up an old KDX.
Yeah.
But man, the ones that you can find are really hammered.
Oh, yeah.
Anymore. It's
And
sad.
really expensive for some reason too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't afford to maintain it, yet you're so convinced that you know what you got.
Oh, we could have a
Yeah,
whole episode about the Facebook Marketplace problem.
maybe we should do that in the future.
We can. So this is a cool one that we never got, unfortunately. And I hate that. It's always Europe or Asia gets all the
Yeah.
cool stuff. We're not allowed to have anything cool. This is what Honda affectionately called the CRM, and this thing was an absolute monster of a two-stroke dual sport. I think they made them up until like 2002, 2003.
Sure.
Kind of a early 90s CR style frame, but a very, very good option for two-stroke dual sports.
So I meant to have a magazine article in one of the little booklets or whatever. Honda had actually embarked on a project. I think it was late 1990s, early 2000s. They were trying to develop a fuel injected two-stroke bike that could, blow away whatever emission standards. I don't remember if it was single or twin cylinder. I know they kind of pulled out all the stops. They were trying to um, do something they were calling like free radical combustion or something like that, where they weren't actually using a spark plug to ignite the premix after a certain point. That was actually retaining like part of the energized exhaust, whatever from the previous cycle to use to ignite the next. Kind of probably butchering the concept, but it was really interesting. And it was after that point that Honda just completely gave up
Yeah.
on developing two strokes because they were convinced that it just was not feasible to create one that could meet um, you know emission standards as they would progress in the future.
Yeah. And I love, when you send me stuff like that, like old lost tech and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to do an episode about that too, where we found some really radical suspension designs and all kinds of cool stuff like that.
Like the leading link forks, and
Yep.
we really need to do an episode on just weird stuff.
Yeah, that would be
or
cool.
old tech that we wish would have stuck around, like
Yeah.
high-low gearboxes.
Oh yeah, be good. Let's jump over to Yamaha here. This is an old IT 465, which is another, simple, very, very good woods weapon that I've seen people get street legal before. And one of Yamaha's best street legal dual sports, which again is something I think they actually did offer this in the early 90s in the US, and it was just a couple of years. We didn't really get it after that. The old DT 200. This thing is
Yep.
an absolute workhorse in everywhere except North America, and was such a good option for a two-stroke dual sport. Now, this next bike is based on this DT 200, and I know I've had my gripes and complaints with this company before, but I really do like this offering that they have. That's that GPX 250. So, obviously Chinese manufactured, but what they did was they actually got the tooling and bought part of the factory where the old DT 200 used to be produced, and we're actually using the original dies and all that stuff.
Nice.
And this thing is actually, as of what I can know right now, I think it is the only available brand new street legal two stroke that you can buy. And again, with the MSO just saying motorcycle, it being kind of a small boutique brand, the EPA they don't fall under the regulations.
Show
and
up
stuff.
to the DMV at 4:30.
Yeah, on a Friday when the lady wants to get out of there.
Slide it right through.
Slide it through.
Yep.
So that kind of leads us to a lot of the Euro offerings.
Yep.
In this day and age. So there's a KTM 300, which is kind of the same generation of what my 500 is right now. Obviously,
I know that there's quite a bit of I wouldn't say development, but offerings in the 125 two-stroke market for Euro.
Yeah.
They have the class system where it's limited by displacement.
Yeah.
Okay, so you say it's 16, 18, what have you, your first bike, you could have a 125 cc four-stroke,
Yeah.
or you could have a 125 cc two-stroke.
Yeah.
Which would be more exciting. Almost undoubtedly a 125 cc two-stroke. That's why you have companies like Beta, Fantic, Sherco, etc., making these little 125 cc runabouts that are pretty much intended to be like a young adult's first bike because they have the class system. Luckily, I was born in the right country, where at age 16 with a learner's permit, you can go get a GSXR 1000, having never thrown a leg over a motorcycle before. But
I
you
thought
know,
this was
I
America.
always thought it was just interesting how much they had in terms of it's only like 125cc two strokes,
Yeah.
but there's several different offerings, and if I remember right, it was Beta, somebody else, like they peeled the little, emblem off the side of the case. It was a Yamaha 125 engine.
Yeah. That might have been
So
Fantic, actually, because they're kind of
that may
partnered up
well
with them.
be.
Here's a Beta 300RR. And Beta really does have some really cool offerings. Obviously, this is a 300. They got the 250s.
Yep.
They have the X trainers, which we've seen a lot of those
Yep.
at 304 Detour Dual
I'd
Sport lately.
be very interested. I think Beta, maybe KTM too, makes a 200.
Yeah,
And
always
people
forget the name of that
call
thing.
it the modern KDX.
Yeah, yeah. And back to the GPX, that is the number one comparison. Is a modern KDX is what that GPX.
I'd be a lot more interested in one if you had a more positive experience during your.
I don't know. I honestly think that I would give the two-stroke a shot, just because what it's based off of.
Sure.
What my problems were more specific to the oddballness of that first year
Sure.
450 engine with weird fuel injection. Yeah, that's carbureted. I don't
Well,
have to worry about that.
I'll
on
make
that
you a
one.
deal. You buy two, give me one. I'll let you know what I think about it.
We need some more sponsors before stuff like that
Yeah.
happens. Last but not least, here's a Sherco 306 days version. Seen a lot of these get street legal. Kind of in that same mold, a lightweight two-stroke, easy to work on.
Yep.
With a decent lighting coil to put your accessories on.
Yeah, which is a huge plus, like we touched on.
Yeah.
Compared to some other offerings out there.
Yeah. Let's go through some of the comments we've got tonight. Appreciate everybody chiming in with us here. Let's go to the first one here. Tyler Vincent says he's seeing a lot of two-stroke supermotos popping up recently too. Yeah, I think that's another realm to allow them to get street legal.
I can see it now. Can't find title. Lost title.
No bill of sale.
No bill of sale. It's not stolen.
Yeah. Let's see. He says Beta just moved to a dual plug setup on their 300. Some new tech and development moving along. That's interesting. Mark Niggemeyer says, read my duo sparkles back in the 1970s on several four-stroke motorcycles. You have a random chain, sold for a couple hours.
Go to his next comment.
I think
Go
that's-
on down.
Yeah. Let me try that again. We had dual spark plugs in the 1970s on several two-stroke motorcycles.
It was my understanding, and it might be flawed, that a lot of bikes that had dual spark plugs were for if you fouled one, you didn't have to spend the time on the side of the trail to pull a plug, put a fresh one in. You could just swap the wire and keep going.
That's cool.
I know on like the ISDT bikes from Tom McKee was telling us all that, it was kind of one of the features that they used. That, I mean, pre-power valve, that was probably a huge benefit.
Sure. Tyler said he didn't know that. 500 motorcycles at the start of the Blackwater. You were high for the halfers.
Nice.
I can imagine that. All that nice
yeah.
premix in there. One of the YouTube comments from 2WM. Thanks, man. You can register them in West Virginia.
Yep, sure can.
Yep, absolutely. I think Jeremy Harley was laughing about when we were talking about the, being able to be an American with a two-stroke against the British there.
Yep.
And what'd you share there?
All right. So I found the link to Dirt Bike Magazine's web article. If you're interested in weird old tech, they've got a great section for it. But this is Honda's attempt to continue the two-stroke I was talking about, utilizing radical combustion. They've got some pretty interesting drawings, explanations of how they were trying to make it work and why they ultimately abandoned the project. And it's one of my favorite reads in terms of old tech.
I'll be sure to share that on the TNT page too, so people can check that out as well.
Yeah, we'll start gathering some stuff. I know I've got enough save links in my favorites folder to do a whole episode on.
I could probably go back to my messages of stuff you
Yeah.
sent me. That there's
Dude, I just
really cool stuff out there.
being an engineer, man. I love stuff like that.
Dan Farnsworth says, again, as IT 175 legalized, didn't have a brake light. When they asked me to apply for a brake, I prove it. I had a brake light. I would rev the engine and make the backlight brighter and always pass. Well, that's a benefit of a two-stroke right there. Last one, Tyler Vincent says, KTM only makes a 150 now. Drop the 200 around the same time the 150 came out. Yep, and that's another option out there for the smaller license class. All right, let's go through some industry news, which I'm excited about because we haven't got to do for a little bit here. So first up, Volter Ross becomes the first person to win the Morocco Rally on a twin-cylinder bike. So interesting.
I take it that he's healed up from his injuries. I know he suffered a pretty gnarly shoulder injury last racing season. I think a knee injury too.
Yeah,
and
I'd say he's good to go. He won 6 of the 8 test sections on that 3,000-mile course. So
pretty crazy.
Yeah,
pretty crazy feat.
Yep. Triumph has decided to sponsor the AMA Adventure Ride Series this year, which is pretty exciting.
That is exciting news.
12 rounds, a lot of the big name dual sport events that you've heard of, Dirty Dabbers, Brentford Valley, they're all kind of in that mold of being partnered with the AMA and doing the adventure bikes thing. So kind of cool to see Triumph do that. Triumph marketeer Adam Vanderveen says that the series will give like-minded riders a chance to have fun together and ride their bikes the way they were intended to. So
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, good for a manufacturer like that to step up. And I
I
know
agree.
like the dual sport series has been sponsored by Beta for several years now. The actual dual sport. Last but not least, man, there's a recall on the Rocky Mountain ATV Tusk 2-track adventure tires, which is kind of concerning because they haven't been out for that long.
I mean, I'd honestly prefer it that way. They catch it early.
Yeah, I know. You can look back at Continental with the TKC 80s. I know there was a recall about those for a while. But this is a specific size, a 150 70 18. So that's for the really big, wide adventure bikes. Manufactured between October of 2023 and January 14th of 2024. It was an improper process during the vulcanization where basically pieces of the tread were falling away. So
I mean, stuff does happen. Manufacturers try their absolute best to deliver a safe and viable product, but I can't let that get in the way of my little joke. So introducing the 2024 Tusk May Pop. May pop now, may pop later. Guaranteed to get you all the way to the scene of the accident.
Oh, that's great. Maybe they're made by Firestone. Remember the old Firestone jokes back in the day like that?
Yeah, I do. That was actually because Ford made the vehicle way heavier than they originally spec'd the tires for, and then tried to put all the blame on Firestone.
I used to love back in the day. Remember Scary Movie 2, where the guy was in the wheelchair and he's drag racing in the hallway against that ghost, and he gets to the end and he crashes, and the camera slowly zooms out and you see the tire sitting there spinning. It says Firestone on the handicap tire.
Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
Oh, there's always good stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's going to lead us into our last, but definitely not least segment. A little bit of Had to Lay Her Down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
This week's Had to Lay Her Down is very interesting. I'm not sure what in the world these guys were trying to accomplish, but it looked like they were having a good time.
They're just trying to exercise their rights, man.
I know. So we'll let this play, and I was laughing. I think I sent this to you, and you were like, I could definitely see us doing this.
Yeah, so this could be us.
Go back.
When I first saw this, I thought that was and now it's a piano.
Yeah.
So that makes this even more unexplainable.
And they hit each other.
How did they get it up there? Why is there You know, maybe
Fantastic.
look at the size of the sprocket on that thing. That's a stunt.
Oh, that's got to
bike.
be a stunt bike.
Oh,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yep.
So That's something else I want in my garage is a like a player piano.
Yeah.
And hire some dude to play saloon music.
What was that old Family Guy skit? Like, play us out, Johnny.
Yep.
Let's do that all the time.
Exactly.
But he's got right over here in the corner. He can do that at the end of every episode. Just
Yep.
play us out.
It's perfect.
All right, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in tonight. Hopefully you learned something. I know I did along the way. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Got a interview guest, Mr. Kane Wagner.
Yes.
Be exciting to talk to him.
Very interesting character.
Absolutely. Puts on all kinds of events with Appalachian ADV. Just did the Fools Rally there this past couple weeks back, which unfortunately I didn't get to go to, but good to talk to him and get his insight on some stuff. So,
Yep.
As always, guys, we appreciate you tuning in. Again, we're going to do our best to try to get the page situation resolved where we can actually live stream to the page. Until then, you catch us on YouTube, Instagram, and my personal page. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.